you all know how important NYCHA is. Let me just highlight two things. One is that NYCHA houses 1 out of every 22 people in the city of New York, right? And more than 80% of NYCHA, of the housing in New York that rents for under $500 a year, a month, wouldn't a year be half a month? A month, yeah, we all want that deal, right? I'm sorry, I'm trying to go fast, but that's obviously a wish, right? But more than 80% of the apartments in New York City that rent for less than $500 a month are NYCHA apartments. So it is a precious resource, and obviously we want to do everything we can to save it. Go ahead. Okay, so as the mayor said, federal housing policy has evolved dramatically. When public housing was begun in 1937, the idea was that this was going to be housing that the federal government funded, the construction and the operation of that housing, to provide housing for low-income folks in cities across the United States. In the 1970s, that shifted very dramatically to the notion that there would be public housing to more of a privately operated model that relied upon vouchers. And that was 1973 with Nixon, 1982 with Ronald Reagan, and really only in 2012 did we start to, during the Obama administration, did we move to giving more flexibility to that privately operated model. The gap between what we need to keep NYCHA up to a state of good repair and what we have from the federal government has grown dramatically. You see the little blue bar at the bottom there is the 5-year federal funding, whereas the gray bar is the need that we have the money that we need to fix the capital needs at NYCHA, and it's a dramatic difference that has grown over time. The capital repair needs, somebody asked about, and where does this $32 billion figure or the $344 million for all the Chelsea developments come from? A third-party consultant samples apartments, samples places in each of the developments, and comes up with an assessment of what are the needs here, what needs to be fixed, right? So for the NYCHA overall, it's $32 billion. A lot of that is the apartments themselves. A lot of it is roofs, elevators, all of those kinds of structural things. At Fulton and Chelsea Elliott, it's a $344 million need. Again, 42% of that is the apartments. About 40% is that yellow. That's the structural, like the roofs, the elevators, the security systems, etc. And that assessment of capital needs is made every 5 years. And again, it's really going into the apartments, going into the buildings, and trying to figure out what is failing here and what are we going to need money-wise to fix those needs. Okay, so we've been struggling really for years, as you know, to come up with ways to invest in NYCHA, right? And how can we get the kinds of money that is needed, the kinds of investment, as the mayor was talking about, to make those repairs, right? NYCHA 2.0 has 3 prongs, right? One is what we call Pact to Preserve. That is renovating individual apartments, taking them into what we call the Section 8 program, right? Again, I don't want to use acronyms, but Section 8 means that the operator has a long-term contract with the federal government to pay the rents of the people in those apartments, right? And to give money to the NYCHA development. It's 20 years, automatically renewable, so we can bank on it. We know that we can make investments because we know that that money will be available, right? Right now, under NYCHA, we get a yearly allocation. We don't know what it's going to be. We don't know what Congress is going to fund. It's too uncertain for us to make investments in the future and to borrow against, right? So that's the first thing, is we're going to comprehensively repair and rehab about 62,000 apartments across the stock. The 62,000 allows us to meet about 75% of the total capital need. needs. That's how those 62,000 were chosen, is really to where are the needs greatest, where do we need to invest to bring down and to address those capital needs and bring those apartments into a state of good repair. The second, and I can tell you a little bit more about this, but as I said, we'll be talking about this and I'll be able to answer any questions that you have. The second prong is what we call build to preserve, right? Across New York City, in many cases, the NYCHA campuses are the least dense areas of their neighborhoods. They may have room on the campuses to build new buildings, and those new buildings can help fund the renovations at those developments or in nearby developments. Right? And then the third is the use of NYCHA's air rights, transfer to preserve. So there are instances where we can transfer air rights over, sell those air rights, and use that money again to bring comprehensive rehabs to the apartments that generated those air rights. So those are the three prongs. I'll say just a tiny bit more about them. So we think that those three prongs will, as I said, address about 75% of the capital needs. Okay? And there you have a pie chart that shows you where they're coming from. I don't think that's critical for today. So let's move on. So the critical thing about the path to preserve, right? Comprehensive rehabs of about 62,000 apartments using this Section 8 mechanism that the Obama administration designed, right? What it does is it fully renovates, addresses the capital needs of those apartments and those developments. It funds comprehensive renovations. NYCHA continues to own the land. They lease the land to a private operator, either a nonprofit or a for-profit private operator, under the terms of a lease that guarantee the kinds of rights that we want to have in place for the tenants, and we'll want to talk more about the kinds of protections that you need, right, and that you want to see there. We had a discussion with what we called the RAD roundtable, which was a lot of the tenant advocates, and talked about what are the most critical things to put in those leases. Guarantee that nobody pays more than 30% of their income in rent. Guarantee that they have the succession rights that they have right now. Guarantee that they have tenant associations that they have now, that those will be recognized. Guarantee that they have the kinds of process scale that you were talking about earlier before anybody is evicted. All of those things are this Bill of Rights that are now incorporated into those leaseholds. And we can talk more about additional concerns that should be in there, additional protections that should be in those leases. The Bill to preserve, the idea here is, as I said, that we use underused land, right? We use land that could be developed, and what we develop there, and that comes back, to the mandatory inclusionary housing that we were talking about. What we would build there would be a mixed income building, right? We would have affordability as the mandatory inclusionary housing program requires, so 20 to 30%, with specified levels of what the incomes of the people getting those affordable.
The article is Phil Steck. He's in the Assemblyman representing Schenectady and other parts of New York State. He's in favor of getting it back to us.
By NYCHA and leased to the private operator and private developer. Okay? NYCHA continues to own that land and manages, right, what happens in that development through the provisions of its lease and its ability to enforce those provisions. Transfer to preserve is when a building is built at less than what the zoning allows. It has sort of unused rights to build, right? It could build, but it's already built, so it doesn't necessarily want to add on to the top. So what it can do is transfer those rights to someone else who can use them to build their building higher than the zoning allows, right? Subject to all kinds of restrictions. And that's what we call it air rights or what we call transfer to preserve. We think that over the next 10 years, We can sell air rights and bring in about $1 billion to help fund repairs and renovations on the campuses that are generating those air rights. Okay, so very briefly, we'll be talking a lot about this. Here is what is a very high-level conceptual idea that we think is the most realistic for Fulton and Chelsea. We're open to other ideas. We want to hear other ideas. We want to find solutions. So I'm advancing this, and we've advanced it in terms of talking with tenants at Fulton so far. This is a way to get the conversation started. We think this is the most realistic way, but we want to hear from you about your concerns and any alternatives. It would involve a step-by-step process, right? So the first step would be we work with the tenants to identify the most viable site on the Fulton campus to build a new building, okay? That new building, right, would then become available for, if we would then work with, again, the Fulton tenants to identify some of the low-rise buildings. What we have in mind is 2 of the low-rise buildings, right, that could be developed higher, right, if they were, if we relocated those tenants into the first building that we built, right, the first one that I talked about. So, and then once they are moved into that building, and only once they are moved into that building, so nobody would be displaced, right, then we would tear down that building and build 2 new buildings that are higher and that therefore could accommodate many more apartments. Again, mixed income, subject to affordability requirements and subject to lease. Mary?
Yes, I have a couple of questions from what you were saying. You said that where our 72 families live is underused land.
No.
Yes, you said underused land. I wrote it down. So my question is, you have buildings there, you have structures that are sound structures, but yet you want to tear them down because you want to build high-rise buildings, but yet you want Fulton houses to maintain not only Fulton houses, but Elliott Chelsea houses as well. And it's not right. It's not right. There has to be a better way. You cannot just come. How would you like if somebody was to sell your areas in front of your backyard? And when you look out your window, you need to understand the decisions you're making for us do not include us. And you need to put yourselves in our shoes when you're thinking about these decisions that you're planning. And that's what I have to say about that.
Yes, thank you. I also want to say that it would be, don't be sorry, it's fine. I just want to make, in the interest of this process and make sure we share the information and we all have the same starting point, if we could just hold off on that until we move into the next phase. But God bless you, Mary. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Those are exactly the kinds of questions and exactly the kinds of discussion that we're here to have. That is exactly why we're here. I just go forward. We did start talking about this with Fulton residents. We talked to about 700, more than 700 people. We did, as the mayor said, take people out on tour buses so that they could see the Ocean Bay Pact development, see what we were talking about. We had other meetings. We stopped that process so that we could start this one, right? And so that wasn't complete. We never talked to the Chelsea folks yet because we stopped that so that we could have this process, okay? I want to just show, Ocean Bay is an example of what we're talking about with the Pact of Preserve. You see, it's hard to see, at least if you're my age, it's hard to see, but you see the kinds of renovations that were done. But more importantly, what you don't see is the renovations behind the walls, the replacements of the pipes, the replacements of the systems, the brand new boilers, the brand new water systems, the brand new roofs, right? And these are, so I just want you to know that there are 6 other developments that are right now in this process. Now, we can talk about all of the issues that go into how do we decide? How do the tenants get involved in figuring out what kind of work needs to be